The path to 10 of Swords is paved with tiny terrors for X-Force, invaded yet again, weaving Colossus into the fabric of the comic and introducing a genuinely surprising villain housed out of Mother Russia. Today I'll answer, how did Krakoa get invaded this time? What do we know about the Cerebro Sword? And who's the surprise villain revealed at the end of X-Force number 11? And what's his history in the Marvel Universe? Spoiler, despite the cover, it is not Omega Red. You're listening to Krakin Krakoa number 72. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. If you like the CBA's YouTube channel or podcast, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. Spoilers for Discuss Comics, specifically X-Men or X-Force number 11, will follow. Writer of this issue is Benjamin Percy, art by Basil Dua, colors by Guru EFX, and letters by Joe Caramagna. Cecilia Reyes, Sage, and Beast are investigating the Russian supersoldiers the teams fought previously, noting some similarities to the Xeno terrorists that landed on Krakoa in X-Force number 1 and assassinated Professor X. Cecilia gets got immediately, which is a tough rub for her, as the character has not had much to do in Dawn of X, but as things tend to go in X-Force, the exploration and investigation into the humans that are out to sort of renounce Krakoan sovereignty, goes very poorly, and Beast and company are yet again taken by surprise by these Russian nesting doll invasion. They've bioengineered their super soldiers to have tinier super soldiers inside of them, and then those super soldiers have tinier super soldiers inside of them. It would almost be cute if it wasn't so horrifying and gross. I do have to say, Beast booking it after a tiny Russian nesting doll with a knife, as nasty as he is one of the funnier beats in the history of X-Force. Speaking of X-Force, they do consistently require some suspension of belief, more than the usual Marvel Universe suspension, in that Krakoa is teeming with mutants, but then security is down to like 3 people. We've got Sage, Cecilia, and Beast. So we have a Russian operative break in, hack Krakoan tech, and look up where Professor X is, seemingly no problem. They also hack and break into Forge's armory, yet again with no problem. Now I understand Krakoa is not anticipating invaders, but security here is a wee bit lax. They've been invaded by Xeno, the Brood, and now the Russian tiny knife guys. If there's not an issue talking about the fact that their security sucks, and I'm sorry Black Tom, but it sucks, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. So Black Tom, to his credit, does take Professor X to his Krakoan safe house. I forget the exact line, but Tom getting to call the professor a daft bald man is pretty great. And the Russian, invader, he can't get to Professor X again, but he does see that nicely mounted mind sword made of Cerebro technology hanging above what I guess is the professor's bed, although it doesn't look particularly comfortable. What is the Mind Sword, the Cerebro Sword? So following Charles Xavier's brief assassination, it got better. There's a relative amount of uncertainty about Jean's abilities to bring him back via resurrection protocols. Magneto turns his longing and doubt into crafting and makes a sword out of the Cerebro shards left behind. Obviously, anything sword-related is pretty interesting as we approach 10 of Swords, but this segment stands out. Every now and then, the sword would wink and glimmer with light or hum with the data still coursing through it. This seems like a big deal. It is relatively easy for enemies to get their hands on Krakoan drugs, but Cerebro and its mutant data is fairly confined to the island and to mutant kind. So stealing the sword potentially changes that, right? If you get the Cerebro sword in your hands, now you have a piece of Cerebro. Now maybe you can reverse engineer that. Maybe you can get the mutant data off of that. That's a big deal. And again, they might not know as much about resurrection protocols as we do, as readers, but the more information they get, obviously these invaders seem to know a heck of a lot. Quentin Quire, on his beat, finally catches a break hooking up with one of the Stefrakukos, whose name I should remember, one of the 5-in-1, but I do not at this moment. I'm going to guess Esme. I'm sure you'll tell me. But for his troubles, for his happy moment, Quentin gets stabbed, yet again, with the Cerebro Sword, and it's recovered in Moscow by a certain someone we'll get to in a second. The gag of Quentin Quire getting killed every single issue is, listen, he's had it coming, and he's had it coming for a long time. I'm actually starting to feel bad for Quentin. I thought, I was laughing along in the early going. Now, I'm really just feeling kind of bad for Quentin. Can the poor little kid Phoenix get a break? So this one took me a minute. The big villain reveal as Quentin gets pushed through the portal into Russia is none other than Mikhail Rasputin. hella false advertising with Omega Red on the cover, and us instead getting the brother of Colossus, of the Rasputin family, standing with his sprawling red cape and scarred face. That's how you know it's Mikhail. Which maybe has just said Michael. I don't know. You'll let me know in the comments, I'm sure. But he's got the Cerebro Sword, okay? And this is a really interesting and, again, very surprising reveal because this character has a very sporadic history in Marvel Comics. And I'm going to go into it beat by beat, and I'm going to cover pretty much every appearance of the character. So who is Mikhail Rasputin? I'll be honest that my knowledge is largely centered around the fact that he's brother to Colossus and Magic, aka Peter and Ilyana Rasputin. He's a classic third-wheel oldest brother who can't be trusted. What's up, Jamie Braddock? In that he was one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen in the Age of Apocalypse, as well as the X-Men Legends video game based around a similar premise. Truly, that is the X-Men Legends game is definitely the most involved I've been with the character. He's got crazy warping powers in that. Throughout the entire Chris Claremont written Uncanny X-Men, though, Colossus believes him to be dead, having died on a Russian cosmonaut mission. Indeed, this is like why Colossus is afraid of flying in space shuttles in the build-up to, I think, Uncanny X-Men number 100. So he's found by Colossus in the X-Men, though, in an alternate dimension in the pages of, I believe it's Uncanny X-Men number 286, in a plot by Jim Lee with a script by John Byrne. While in this alternate dimension, Michael falls in love, finds some modicum of peace, and then uses his mutant energy manipulation abilities to warp a portal shut and accidentally kill everybody he cared about in the dimension. It's a pretty tough break. This is the beginning of the end for the character, as from this point, his mind is irrevocably fractured, right? He's just totally broken after this point. When he's brought back to the world of the X-Men and the mutants, they absolutely try to help, but he's too far gone, and he's extremely powerful to boot. For clarity, he is not officially on the list of classified Omega-level mutants, although, throughout history and his battles with the X-Men, certainly his performance is, close to that caliber. For the briefest of moments, he takes over leadership of the Morlocks, but he quickly decides the only solution is to drown them all in their home sewers, very, very quickly. Decides this in some sort of kind of strange sacrifice of what he says is, monsters like me. I would say on the Morlock leadership rankings, it's Callisto and Storm are probably 1A, 1B, and then Mikhail is 70th. I don't even know who the other ones are. He's just dead last. Later, it's revealed that he saved some number of the Morlocks from drowning and has since been keeping them in another dimension he rules, where the Morlocks literally have to climb a hill every day trying to reach him in a haunting Sisyphean test of survival of the fittest. It's during this time that Mikhail warps some of the Morlocks into their 90s terrorist alter ego Gene Nation, prone to acts of violence and bombings against humanity, until Storm comes along and puts a halt to things in her first ever miniseries, believe it or not. During this time, Mikhail Rasputin, he tries to get Storm to be the mother to these Morlocks, the way that he considers himself their father, and, unsurprisingly, Storm is having none of that. He plays a role in Apocalypse the 12, ultimately regaining some sense of his ties to Peter and the X-Men and saving them from Apocalypse and company. He takes tremendous vacations between appearances, as evidenced by his next appearance in the mid-2000s Colossus Bloodline miniseries, in which he's frequently found just kind of moping in alternate dimensions. He joins up with Mr. Sinister for a minute, fights Colossus in space, and at the end of the day reconciles a bit with his brother before sacrificing himself to, again, wander the dimensions. If he's been around since then, definitely let me hear about it in the comments, because I want to read that. I want to know what this character has been up to. Again, he has sporadic and infrequent enough comic book appearances that you can read the whole history of Mikhail Rasputin pretty easily. It's not too crazy. Perhaps I'll do a CBH reading order if I find the time. As to why it makes sense to have this character standing on the other side as this sort of surprise villain reveal of a Krakoan gate leading to Russia, well, X-Force number 11 is also the issue that begins the road back to X-Force for Colossus. Peter is married to a writer or something, I don't know if they're officially married, happy to be farming in the Savage Land, and pulling a classic Pete, nah, I don't want to be an X-Man anymore, even though we all know that that's not going to last even a minute. Mikhail's involvement, and presumably yet another heel turn for the untrustworthy older Rasputin, is as good a reason as any to get Colossus back on X-Force and back invading Mother Russia to retaliate for their assault on Krakoa. I don't know if I just missed it, but Peter Rasputin, he's got some serious baggage from what happened in Russia, right? We saw in, I believe, X-Force number 1, he returns from Russia, and he saved a bunch of mutants. He got them out of there. Again, Russia, they're not allowing Krakoan access. They're not allowing these gates to function, but he gets really messed up. So I don't know that we've seen the story officially of what happened, and perhaps it involves his brother, right? That could be a big part of it. So coming up next in X-Force number 12, the Krakoan reads Mother Russia. I think unsurprisingly, we're going to, I think we can kind of take for granted here that the invasion of the Tiny Knife Men is not going to be a roaring success. Like, I don't think they're actually going to conquer Krakoa, and instead the X-Men will regroup and rally and invade Russia and figure out what to do next. Colossus, I imagine, will be a part of that. What I'm particularly interested in here is, so Mikhail Rasputin, when he lashes out against the X-Men, it's not usually with like any particular grand scheme in mind, and a lot of times he's working with or for someone. So like I mentioned in Colossus Bloodline, he's working with Mr. Sinister, but in the Storm miniseries, it's revealed at the very end of that he's actually working for Dark Beast. With all of his setting up of Gene Nation and all of that. Now, Dark Beast would be a really interesting addition to the X-Force mythos because of the way Beast has been behaving throughout this entire series, right? He's deeply, deeply ethically compromised. We've been talking a lot about, like, is there a Krakoan punishment, a la Sabretooth that is fitting for Beast at this point? Bringing the literal Dark Beast into the picture, I think, would be an interesting progression, beyond what we've seen so far. So thanks everybody for listening. Those are my thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say in the comments. In the meantime, if you like Comic Book Herald, Krakin, Krakoa, you can support the site and the efforts over at patreon.com/Comic Book Herald. Particular thanks to the Mysterious Benefactors tier supporting the site at the $10 a month level. They are all named here. That is one of the benefits that you get for doing so over at patreon.com/Comic Book Herald. I'm Dave. You can find my work at comicbookherald.com. You can find me at Comic Book Herald pretty much anywhere online. And if you look for the best comics ever and My Marvelous Year podcast, you can find more talk about comics and engaging with these fun books. So I want to hear your thoughts on what's going on in X-Force down in the comments. Definitely let me know. I will have a Kraken Krakoa. I'm trying to do some big weekend deep dives is kind of my plan here, after these weekly as comics come out reviews. So the next one coming up, I'll give you a little hint if you made it to the end, is all about Mr. Sinister. Okay, I got some thoughts, got some deep dive, weird theories and ideas on what's going on with Mr. Sinister coming up next. So thanks everybody for listening, and as always, enjoy the comics.